Greetings and welcome back to Of Gods and Gamemasters, a channel about building worlds for speculative fiction and various other role-playing game topics. This episode is Gods, a Matter of Creation, in which we begin to explore just what sort of world the gods we came up with last episode would create. You should probably go watch episode 1, Gods, filing off the serial numbers, if you haven't yet. I'm Jack Kellum, at Jack of Tales on Twitter. All my links are in the description, including the link to my one published adventure, Sunken Temple of the Swamp God, over on DM's Guild. Support me on Patreon if you like what I do, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell for notifications. I accept tips on Ko-Fi as well. With the boring pay-the-bill stuff out of the way, on to the content. Last episode, we came up with 11 gods, making a pantheon from deities stolen from a wide variety of real-world sources, and getting rid of the evidence so we could use the bits we like, without the baggage. As a quick recap, we have Savios, king of the gods, god of storms. His wife, Kaela, queen of heaven, goddess of knowledge and peace. Telos, the lord of the earth, god of nature and living things. His wife, Maria, lady of the seas, goddess of the waters and grief, who acts as a guide to the afterlife, a psychopomp. Solus, the angry sun, god of the sun as well as god of disease. He's lord of the underworld, where the sun rests in the hours of night. Ignea, mistress fire, goddess of forge, fire, healing. Lunos, the gender-fluid, non-binary moon deity, god of the moon, nighttime, and mystery, and their longtime partner in crime, Vulpos, the ever-changing, god of trickery, shapeshifters, and magic. On the other side of things, we have Interitus, god of war and tyranny, with his hangers-on Rixa, the goddess of strife, and Metus, the nightmare, god of terror. So what kind of a world does that give us? Well, let's start at the beginning. Actually, like most myths, let's start just before the beginning. We'll riff off the most common situation at the dawn of time. There's not exactly nothing, more like a formless something. Darkness and void, or Gununga Gap, a misty nothing according to the Norse, or a vast, endless ocean. That last may actually be the most common, found in some Native American myths, some Hindu myths, the Japanese creation tale, and others. All of it, though, is basically the same. Chaos. Many religions also have primordial creatures predating the gods, although we'll keep that to a minimum here. No need for actual titans, as you'll see. There's tons of things you could slide into this space if you want to, though, from Fomor to Great Old Ones, if there's a meaningful difference. In keeping with Savios as king, we'll make him creator, too, though that isn't always the case. So, a lot of creator gods just wake up alone. No explanation is needed for where they come from, so we won't give him one here. Having a secret explanation in your world's hidden lore could be really cool, though. As I walk you through this, keep in mind that I'm following what I believe to be the character of the gods I've chosen, how they'd react in each situation. If you choose different gods, they act differently. Basically, try to put yourself in their place and roleplay them as they progress. Anyway, Savios wakes up in the dark, floating in an endless, formless nothing. Let's have him make things Storm God style, by getting mad. So, angry at the silence and being alone, he slams his hands together and yells. The sound is so loud, and the sparks from his hands striking together so bright, that the first thunder and lightning occur, and purely as a byproduct, the chaos separates into sky, earth, and water, which also wake up, it was pretty noisy, as Kaela, Telos, and Maria. Like most such stories, they aren't alone. Out in the dark, something else wakes up. The demon dragon thing we talked about in the first episode? We'll call it Invidia, which means envy or spite. Invidia wakes up angry. It hates itself, it hates everything else, but most of all it hates the light and noise that Savios just made, and the noise the gods make talking to each other. That has shades of both Tiamat and Grendel in it. It goes after Savios, tries to kill him. There's a huge battle. Savios wins, tears Invidia in half. Blood spatters everywhere, and from then on spawns hateful monsters. Savios tosses the bits out into the dark, and they land in what the D&D would consider the abyss. Once there, from the parts is born Interitus, first child of spite. He then crafts his own servant children from more of the remains, and that gives us Rixa, and Metis. We can clear up more of the cosmology later. Meanwhile, back at creation, Savios and Kaela work together to create a permanent storm to protect the outside of the world, mostly holding out the monsters. Mostly. Mera and Tellus get busy making life. Both couples end up with kids. Solus and Ignia are the children of the sky, with Lunos and Vulpos the children of the earth and waters. Just riffing off fairly common mythic connections there, Pantheon families often make for more interesting conflicts and interactions than unrelated ones. So at this point we have a world, but we haven't explained where the sapient species came from, whichever ones we want, or specific monsters, although the blood spatter makes a darn good general origin. Let's stay pretty generic, because this is just an example piece. We don't need to explain every species all at once, just the ones with a big impact on our world. In general, a lot of monsters, especially aberrations and monstrosities, come from the blood of Nvidia. But where do our PCs come from, and who are they? We can go with the basic D&D species to start. Human, halfling, dwarf, elf, and half-elf. Most of the time in D&D, the elves come first, followed by the dwarves. I'm not trying to get super special here, so we'll stick with that. We'll say that Tellus and Maria made the elves together to look after their natural environments, which is why you have, say, wood elves or sea elves. Dwarves come a good bit later when Ignia needs crafting hands. She crafts them specifically to obtain resources for her and to help her make things. Looking at the world, Savios sees it's mostly empty, and he and Kaela create humans to live where the elves and dwarves do not. Lunos and Vulpos collaborate to make halflings. Some of the time they're simple farmers, the rest of their time they're thieves and tricksters. You don't know which one you're going to get. They partake of both their gods' natures. They live amongst any of the others. Half-elves come way later, as do the other crossbreeds. Aasimar and tieflings have pretty much the same explanation in every setting, which is devils and angels fooling around, though they might stick out a bit in this one. As for orcs, goblinoids, kobolds, etc., members of the other races twisted by the evil of the blood of Nvidia. It still doesn't make them inherently evil, but it explains the urge toward it, maybe, and the way others perceive them. Dragons, on the other hand, here's where carefully crafted comes in. Interitus makes the chromatic dragons from pieces of Nvidia. Then Savios and his family construct the metallics to combat them. A special mention I have here, Yuan-Ti or some other kind of serpent folk. I really think these are the main servants of Interitus and secretly behind the fall of the Great Empire, mostly because of the association between Ares and serpents that we mentioned at the end of the last episode. Which brings us very naturally to the end of this topic and the beginning of the next. Next episode will be titled Gods, the Rise and Fall of Empire.